Welcome to part 4 of my NIS 2 series. From part 1 you learned whether your company has to comply with NIS 2, in part 2 we covered what has to be done in case you are affected, and in part 3 we covered 12 concrete steps you can take right away if you want to be NIS 2 compliant. In this part we cover all the things that have to be documented. Most of them have to be documented in multiple documents, but I hope after this video you get a more concrete idea of all the times I said must be documented previously. Also, I hope that my fancy graphics will make this video more bearable. I will go through the documents as they are required chronologically in the NIS 2 directive. Since we are only dealing with Chapter 4, we start with Article 20, which requires 3 things that must be documented. Management approval of cybersecurity measures, documented in the risk treatment plan. Management oversight of implementation, documented in the measurement report, in internal audit reports and in the management review minutes. Finally, management training and offer of employee training. This is documented in the training and awareness plan. You'll recall that this is what I covered in part 2 when I talked about management responsibilities. Moving on to Article 21, which covers most of the documents. Appropriate and proportionate terms, technical and organizational measures to manage risks. They're documented in the risk treatment table and the risk treatment plan and various other policies. Account of entity size, risk, and impact to gauge proportionality. That's covered in the risk assessment methodology and in the risk assessment table. Policy on risk analysis. That's covered in the risk assessment methodology. Policy on information system security. This is now a separate policy of the same name. We now cover a bunch of things that are the steps that arise once an incident happens. These things are vital to document as they will be asked of you if anything goes wrong. It is always important to prove to the authorities that you had plans in place and you did the best to follow them. Incident handling. This is covered in the incident management procedure and in the incident logs. Business continuity. You gotta have a business continuity plan. Backup management. Again, a policy of the same name. Disaster recovery plan. Crisis management plan. These 5 topics need not only a thorough plan with clear responsibilities, but also regular training. If you never practice disaster recovery, you will have a disaster when you actually need it. Moving on to topics we already discussed. Supply chain security. Supplier security policy, security clauses in contracts and confidentiality statements, such as NDAs for example. Security and acquisition and maintenance of network and information systems. This is written down in the security development policy and in the specification of information system requirements. Policies and procedures to assess the effectiveness of cybersecurity measures. Remember, I talked about that you need to define how you measure success. They're covered in the measurement report. Basic cyber hygiene practices. There you have an own IT security policy. Cybersecurity training, which I will cover in the next part of this series, again going back to the training and awareness plan we had previously. Encryption policy, have an own policy. HR, so human resources security, again a separate policy. And access control, also a separate policy. Asset management are documented through the asset management procedure and of course an inventory. Do you use MFA, so multi-factor authentication? This is handled in the authentication policy. How do you secure voice, video and text communication? That's documented in the information transfer policy and in the secure communication policy. What about emergency communications? How are they secured? That's documented also in the secure communication policy. We know packeted suppliers where, if you remember, we have to take into account the unique vulnerabilities, quality of product and cybersecurity practices. These are documented in the supplier security policy and in the risk assessment and treatment reports. We also talked about corrections that need to be undertaken from time to time. Document those in the procedure for corrective action and the corrective action form. This concludes Article 21, thank God. We are not quite finished though, we still need to look at Article 23, which defines reporting to authorities. We have a notification of CSIRT that's documented in the significant incident notification for authority. You also have to notify the users, though there you have a significant incident notification for recipients of services. You notify your users immediately and you have 24 hours to notify the authorities. You give an early warning, in this case to the CSIRT, and tell them whether you suspect any malicious activity and whether there is cross-border impact. You also have to notify the CSIRT about the initial assessment of the incident, including severity and impact. This is also done through the significant incident notification for authority. You also have to do a final report, which no later than 1 month after submission of the incident notification has to be delivered to the authorities. You document that in a significant incident final report. Next is a progress report in the event of an ongoing incident at the time of submission of the final report. This goes into the significant incident progress report. Finally, upon request, you have to provide status updates, which go into the significant incident intermediate report. And there you have it. I didn't promise too much, all the documents you need according to the NIS 2 and further reporting obligations. Have fun with them and see you in part 5, in which I will cover cybersecurity training.